The first thing Megan Caldwell felt was warmth. Not the dry heat of an office left running overnight, but the kind that comes from a hand, from skin against skin. She opened her eyes. Executive suite, 4th floor. The bedside lamp was off, but enough December light leaked through the blinds to show her the glass of water she did not remember anyone pouring. The blanket she did not remember anyone pulling over her. Adam Kessler sat in the leather chair beside the bed, still wearing his gray work shirt, his head tilted to one side, breathing slow and even. His right arm hung between the chair and the mattress, and her fingers were wrapped around his wrist. Not gripping, just resting there, as if her hand had gone searching in the dark and found the only thing worth holding. She did not remember reaching for him. She did not remember being carried here. She did not let go. This story might not go where you think. It starts long before this room, long before that hand. Stay, and I will show you how two people ended up exactly where neither of them planned. Portland, Oregon. The Pearl District, 3 blocks off Burnside. Caldwell Properties ran commercial real estate out of a 4-story limestone building with brass lettering above the entrance that had not changed in 30 years. 16 employees. A portfolio of office towers, mixed-use developments, and retail plazas across the Pacific Northwest. The kind of firm where everyone knew everyone, where the lobby smelled like coffee by 6:45, and where a name on the door still meant something. Adam Kessler had been the building operations manager for 8 months. 36 years old, quiet in a way that made people forget he was in the room until something broke and he had already fixed it. He handled HVAC schedules, vendor coordination, maintenance logs, security access. He arrived at 7, took the stairs instead of the elevator, and sat at a desk in the basement operations bay that had no window and no nameplate. He left at 3:15 every day without exception. No one questioned it. No one needed to. Josie Kessler was the reason. 9 years old, 4th grade at Chapman Elementary, 12 minutes from the office by car. Adam picked her up at 3:25, and they drove home to a 2-bedroom apartment on Hawthorne Boulevard. That was the architecture of his day, and he never deviated from it. On his desk sat a small framed photo of Josie holding a library book, half smiling at whoever stood behind the camera. No other photos. No ring on his hand. Megan Caldwell was 33. CEO of Caldwell Properties for 2 years. Her father, Donald Caldwell, had built the firm from a single duplex purchase in 1989. He had grown it through 2 recessions, a real estate crash, and 30 years of Portland's transformation from timber town to tech corridor. When he died of a heart attack at his desk on a Tuesday afternoon, his will named Megan as his successor. Not the board, not the COO. His daughter, who had spent 4 years as a development analyst in the company and 2 years before that finishing her MBA at Oregon State. She arrived before anyone else and left after everyone. Lunch was a protein bar at her keyboard. Dinner was takeout eaten standing at the window while reviewing site plans. She ran the company the way her father had, on instinct, on stubbornness, on the quiet conviction that no one would care about this place more than a Caldwell, except her father had gone home at 6. Megan could not remember the last time she had left the building in daylight. Mitchell Crane was the reason she could not. Crane had been COO for 21 years. Hired by Donald Caldwell when the firm had 4 employees and a single office on 10th Avenue. He had built the vendor network from scratch, structured the leasing pipeline, and overseen every renovation project for 2 decades. When Donald died, Mitchell expected the title. The board expected it too. The will said otherwise, and Mitchell Crane had spent the 2 years since making sure Megan felt the weight of that decision every single day. He controlled vendor relationships. He controlled financial reporting. He spoke with the quiet authority of a man who had been in the building longer than anyone still breathing. Megan had strategy, vision, her father's instinct for location and timing. But Mitchell had the infrastructure, and he made sure every decision Megan made passed through his hands before it touched the ground. Adam and Megan interacted the way a CEO and a building operations manager do. He submitted maintenance reports. She signed off on them. Occasionally they passed in the hallway, and she nodded, and he nodded back, and that was the full extent of it. But there was one thing Megan noticed and never mentioned. Every night she stayed late, which was every night. A glass of water appeared on her desk. No note, no explanation, just a clean glass, filled to the same level, placed on the right side of her keyboard. She never saw who left it. She never asked. She drank it every time. The Whitfield acquisition landed on Megan's desk on a Wednesday in late October. A 12-story mixed-use building on Southwest 3rd Avenue. Ground floor retail, upper floors office space, rooftop terrace with views of the Willamette River. Mitchell's development team had sourced the deal, run the preliminary analysis, and assembled a purchase recommendation of $14.2 million. The numbers had cleared internal review. Mitchell's signature sat at the bottom of the summary page, right above the line that read recommended for board approval. Megan sat with the spreadsheet for 3 hours that afternoon. Something was wrong. She could feel it the way a mechanic hears an engine running half a beat off. Not a sound she could name, but a rhythm that did not match. The margins looked too generous for a building of that age in that corridor. The projected return exceeded comparable assets by almost a full percentage point. She went through the formulas line by line and could not find a single error, which bothered her more than finding one would have. At 4:50, Adam came in to deliver the monthly maintenance report. He crossed the office in 3 steps, set the folder on the corner of her desk, and turned to leave. The spreadsheet was open on her screen, rotated slightly toward the window where the afternoon light caught the cells. He stopped walking. "That cap rate," he said. He was looking at the screen from 6 feet away. "The expense line doesn't include the reserve allocation. You're calculating on gross operating income, not net." Megan looked at him, then at the screen, then back at him. "Run those numbers on actual net," Adam said, "and the return drops below your acquisition threshold by close to $3 million. He said it the way someone says the elevator is on the left. No inflection, no posture, just information delivered and released. Megan did not respond immediately. She turned to the screen, scrolled to the expense block, and saw exactly what he had described. The reserve allocation, standard for any commercial building over 15 years old, had been omitted from the operating expenses, inflating the net operating income and, with it, the cap rate. A basic error, the kind a first-year analyst should catch, the kind Mitchell's team had not. She looked up. Adam was already setting the maintenance report on her desk. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once and left the room. That night, Megan pulled his personnel file. His resume listed his last position as operations coordinator at a property management firm in Chicago called Lakeshore Realty Partners. She called the firm the next morning. The woman in HR paused for a long time. "Adam Kessler? He was our vice president of asset strategy. Led a 12-person team. Left when the Hollander Pacific merger eliminated his entire division about 2 years ago. We were sorry to lose him." Megan hung up and sat with the phone in her hand for a long time. A building operations manager who could read a cap rate error from across the room. A former vice president resetting thermostats and replacing water filters in a basement office with no window. She had been walking past him for 8 months without a second glance. And Mitchell Crane, who controlled every financial report in the building, had no idea what was sitting 2 floors below his office. The conversation happened at 8 the next morning, before anyone else arrived. Megan closed the door to her office and placed Adam's personnel file on the desk between them. He sat in the chair across from her with his hands resting on his knees. "VP of Asset Strategy," Megan said. Adam looked at the file. He did not pick it up. The division got eliminated. Hollander acquired Pacific Northwest Holdings in a stock deal, merged the asset teams in Chicago and Seattle, and cut everyone above manager level. 214 people. That was about 2 years ago. "And you came here," Megan said, "to Portland, to manage building operations. I needed a job with consistent hours within 15 minutes of my daughter's school. This was posted. The hours fit." Megan waited for more. The justification, the bitterness, the story people always tell when they have to explain a fall. The rehearsed version that makes it sound like a choice. Adam offered none of it. He had taken the job because it existed and because it fit the shape his life required, and that was the complete answer. "The Whitfield numbers," Megan said. "You were right. 3.1 million off." Adam nodded. "I pulled the deal from the board agenda this morning," Megan continued. "Mitchell's team will have to resubmit with corrected figures. If the return still holds, we proceed. If not, we pass." "Makes sense," Adam said. Megan studied him for a moment. He was not performing humility. He was not waiting for recognition. He had delivered the information and moved on, the way he moved through every task in the building, completely, quietly, and without expectation. She did not ask him to take on more work. But that afternoon, she granted his access badge clearance to the company's financial analysis server. The next morning, a folder appeared on his desk. Inside were 4 acquisition proposals flagged with yellow tabs and a handwritten note in Megan's writing. "Your eyes, please." Mitchell noticed within the week. Not the folders. The access logs. Adam Kessler's badge credentials had appeared on the financial server 6 times in 3 days, pulling lease analyses, vendor payment histories, and capital expenditure reports that had nothing to do with HVAC schedules or water pressure. Mitchell raised it during a hallway conversation that was not casual. "I noticed your building maintenance person has been browsing our financial records." "He's reviewing acquisition data," Megan said. "At my request." Mitchell studied her for a long moment. His hands were in his pockets, and his expression carried the particular patience of a man who has been managing people longer than the person in front of him has been alive. That's an unusual request for someone who fixes air filters for a living. "The Whitfield deal had a $3 million error in it," Megan said. "Adam found it. Your team didn't." She walked past him down the hall. Mitchell stood where he was with his shoulders square and his jaw set, watching her go. Then he turned and walked back to his office and closed the door without a sound. Mitchell found Adam in the basement utility room the following Tuesday afternoon. Adam was on his knees replacing a pressure valve on the main water line, his sleeves rolled to the elbows, a wrench in his right hand. Mitchell stood in the doorway with his arms folded and waited. Adam looked up, set the wrench down, waited. "I've been here 21 years, Mitchell said. His voice was even, conversational, the tone of a man offering friendly advice. "I was here before Megan, before half the people in this building. I've watched a lot of people come through here thinking they could shortcut their way into something. Analysts, consultants, contractors who thought they could turn a handshake into an office." He paused. "You're on a quarterly contract, Adam. Renews in 6 weeks. I signed the vendor renewals around here. Keep that in mind." Adam picked up the wrench. He tightened the valve fitting with 2 careful turns, wiped his hands on a rag, and looked at Mitchell directly. He said nothing. Mitchell held the look for 3 seconds, then turned and walked back up the stairs. His footsteps echoed in the stairwell for a long time. The next 3 weeks ground Megan down. Mitchell had been working the board for months. Quiet dinners with individual members, carefully worded emails questioning Megan's timeline on 2 stalled developments in the Beaverton corridor, private conversations about whether the company needed more experienced leadership during a period of market uncertainty. The language was always measured. The implication was always the same. In early November, 3 board members submitted a joint letter to the full board requesting a formal CEO performance review. The vote was scheduled for November 21st. If the review moved forward, Megan would have to justify every decision she had made since taking the chair. Mitchell would sit in the room as COO, offering context when asked. Everyone knew what that meant. Megan worked 16-hour days, then 18. Her office became a landscape of spreadsheets, financial projections, and legal briefs stacked in columns along the windowsill. She ate less. She spoke less. The only people who saw her after 8 in the evening were the building security guard making his rounds and Adam Kessler making his. Adam never said a word about her hours. He never suggested she go home. He never offered advice or concern or any of the things people offer when they are trying to be helpful and are instead being intrusive. But every night he stayed. An analysis packet appeared on her desk beside the glass of water. Lease comparisons she had not asked for. Market benchmarks organized by quarter and property type. Vendor cost breakdowns cross-referenced against regional averages. Each packet saved her 2 or 3 hours of research. Each one was unsigned. On a Thursday evening in the second week of November, Megan reached for the glass of water and stopped. She had left a stack of papers on the right side of her keyboard that morning. Someone had moved them to make room for the glass, and the handwriting on the top sheet, Adam's analysis of a Selwood lease, matched the slight leftward slant of the condensation ring on the coaster beneath the glass. The same hand had placed both. She turned and looked through her glass office wall toward the operations bay on the floor below. The stairwell door was still swinging shut. Adam's desk lamp was on. His chair was empty. He had just been here. Megan looked at the glass for a long time. Then she picked it up and drank. The next morning, She placed the empty glass on Adam's desk in the operations bay before he arrived. She set it on the right side of his keyboard, in the exact same spot. When Adam came in at 7 and saw it, he paused for a moment. Then he sat down and began his day. Neither of them mentioned it. The night of November 12th fell on a Wednesday. Megan had been at her desk since 5 that morning, 22 consecutive hours now, preparing for the board presentation that would determine whether she kept her position. 3 board members aligned with Mitchell had circulated a memo to the full board calling for a leadership transition plan. Mitchell had not signed the memo. He did not need to. Everyone recognized the phrasing. Megan built her defense argument line by line. Revenue growth under her tenure, 11% year-over-year. Occupancy rates across the portfolio, 93%, highest in company history. 3 new acquisitions completed, 2 more in pipeline. The Whitfield correction and the $3.1 million it had saved the company. She compiled it into a 61-slide presentation with appendices, financial tables, and a 5-year strategic plan she had never had time to write until now. She rehearsed the talking points standing at the window, then sitting, then standing again, because sitting made her feel like she was already defending herself. By 10 that night, she was reading the same slide for the 4th time without absorbing a word. At 11:14, Adam finished his nightly building check on the 4th floor. The hallway was dark except for the light spilling from Megan's office at the end of the hall. The door was open. He stepped inside. Megan was slumped forward on her desk. Her right cheek rested on her forearm. Her left hand still touched the keyboard, index finger on the arrow key, as though she had been scrolling when her body gave out. A half-eaten granola bar sat on the edge of her mouse pad, 1 bite taken and abandoned. Her breathing was shallow and steady, the involuntary rhythm of someone who had not chosen to sleep but had simply been overruled by exhaustion. Adam said her name, then again louder. She did not move. Her shoulders did not shift. Her fingers did not twitch. He stood there for a moment looking at her, the shadows under her eyes, the tension still locked in her shoulders even while unconscious. The presentation deck glowing on her screen behind her, slide 47 of 61, the Whitfield correction page, the one that had his numbers on it. He reached past her and saved the file, closed the laptop screen, turned off the desk lamp. Then he bent down, slid one arm beneath her knees and the other behind her back, and lifted her from the chair. She weighed less than he expected. Her head fell against his shoulder, and her left hand hung at her side. She smelled like coffee and paper and the faint lavender of a hand lotion she kept in her desk drawer. He carried her down the darkened hallway to the executive suite at the far end of the 4th floor, the bedroom Donald Caldwell had installed 20 years ago because he believed no one should drive home tired. Adam laid her on the bed carefully, lowering her head to the pillow the way someone sets down something that might break. He pulled the blanket from the foot of the mattress and spread it across her, folding the edges the way he folded Josie's blanket at home. He filled a glass of water from the bathroom sink and set it on the nightstand. He sat down in the leather chair beside the bed. He would wait 5 minutes, make sure her breathing stayed normal, then leave and lock up behind him. 5 minutes became 10. 10 became 20. The building was completely silent, the kind of silence that only exists in commercial buildings after midnight, when the HVAC cycles down and the elevators stop and the whole structure holds still. The chair was deep, and the leather was warm, and Adam's body, which had been awake since 5:30 that morning, made the decision for him. He fell asleep with his right arm resting on the edge of the mattress, his hand open on the sheet. Sometime around 3 in the morning, Megan shifted in her sleep. Her left hand slid across the sheet, found his wrist, and closed around it. Not a grip, not a clutch, just contact. Fingers resting against his pulse as though confirming something she could not name while awake. Neither of them woke up. When morning came and Megan opened her eyes to find his hand in hers, something shifted between them that neither of them acknowledged and neither of them reversed. But 2 very different things happened in the days that followed. The first was silence. They did not speak about that night. Not in the hallway, not in her office, not in the elevator, not in the maintenance reports he continued to deliver at 4:50 every afternoon. Adam still set the glass of water on her desk each evening. Megan still drank it. The routine held, but the space inside the routine had changed, contracted by some fraction neither of them measured, the way a room feels different after someone has slept in it. The second was access. Megan gave Adam full credentials to every financial system in the company, not limited to acquisitions. Everything. Vendor payment records, capital expenditure logs, renovation budgets going back 3 years, general ledger entries, purchase orders, wire transfer authorizations. She told him to prepare a comprehensive financial audit to support her board defense. She needed someone she trusted to look at what she had never had the time or the bandwidth to examine. And she trusted Adam Kessler in a way she could not fully explain and did not try to. It took him 4 days. On the morning of the 5th day, Adam walked into Megan's office at 7 carrying a manila folder. He closed the door, sat down in the chair across from her desk, and set the folder between them. The folder was thick. The edges were tabbed with colored flags, yellow, red, and blue, in a system she had not asked him to create. 14 renovation contracts over the last 3 years, Adam said, all routed through the same 3 vendors: Cascade Building Group, Pacific Edge Interiors, and Ridgeline Mechanical Services. Megan leaned forward. Those are Mitchell's vendors. He's managed the renovation pipeline since before I took over, since before my father died. All 3 vendors are subsidiaries of the same parent entity, Adam said. They share a registered agent. The parent company is an LLC called Crane & Associates, registered in Washington State under the name Margaret Linden. Megan did not move. Her hands were flat on the desk. Her coffee sat untouched beside her left wrist. Margaret Linden, Adam said, is Mitchell Crane's wife's maiden name. He opened the folder to the first tabbed section. Inside were 14 contract summaries, each printed on a single page. On the left side of each page, Adam had written the invoiced amount. On the right, the market rate for identical work based on 3 independent estimates he had pulled from industry databases. The markups ranged from 35 to 52%, consistent across all 14 contracts, consistent across all 3 years. At the bottom of the last page, in pencil, Adam had written a single number: $4.7 million. He's been billing the company through his own shell entities for 3 years, Adam said. The money goes out as vendor payments, comes back as revenue to an LLC he controls. The books look clean because the invoices are real. The work was done. It just cost 40% less than what we paid. Megan stared at the number at the bottom of the page. She picked up the folder and held it the way someone holds something that changes the shape of everything around it. The board pressure, she said quietly. The performance review. The memo about leadership transition. If the board removes you as CEO, Adam said, the company's valuation drops. Uncertainty, leadership vacuum, market correction. He can make a below-market acquisition offer through a third-party fund, buy the company with the money he stole from it. He's not trying to take my job, Megan said. He's trying to buy your company, Adam said. Your job is just in the way. Megan set the folder down. She looked at Adam across the desk, the same desk where her father had reviewed this man's hiring paperwork 8 months ago without knowing what he was getting. How did you trace the LLC? She asked. Secretary of State filings are public record in Washington, Adam said. I matched the registered agent name across all 3 vendor registrations. Same individual, same address in Vancouver, Washington. Once you see the pattern, the rest is arithmetic. The board meeting was called for November 21st at 9 in the morning. 8 members seated around the walnut conference table on the 3rd floor, the same table Donald Caldwell had bought at auction in 1994. Mitchell Crane sat at the far end, where he had sat for 21 years. Megan took the head of the table with the manila folder in front of her and Adam's analysis organized by tab. She opened with her prepared defense. Revenue growth, occupancy rates, the acquisition pipeline, the Whitfield correction. She spoke for 22 minutes, and the board listened, and Mitchell listened, and 3 members aligned with Mitchell shifted in their chairs the way people do when they are waiting for their turn to speak. Then Megan set the manila folder on the table and opened it to the first red tab. She walked through each contract, one by one. The vendor names, the invoiced amounts, the market comparisons, the LLC registration, the registered agent, the maiden name. She laid out the $4.7 million in 14 separate line items, and she did not raise her voice, and she did not editorialize. She let the numbers do exactly what numbers do when they are placed in a row and allowed to speak for themselves. The room went quiet. Mitchell leaned back in his chair. He unbuttoned his jacket with one hand and looked at Megan the way a man looks at someone who has made a serious miscalculation. "This is fabricated," he said. His voice was calm, almost kind. "Assembled by a building maintenance worker with no financial credentials and no authority to access these records. I built the renovation pipeline that kept this firm profitable during the worst downturn in 40 years. And this is what happens when you hand confidential data to someone who replaces light fixtures." One of the board members turned to Megan. "Who prepared this analysis?" "Adam Kessler," Megan said. "Building operations manager. Former vice president of asset strategy at Pacific Northwest Holdings." Mitchell's right hand moved to the pen in front of him and stayed there, pressing it against the table without clicking it. The board split. 3 members dismissed the findings. 2 called for Mitchell's immediate suspension. 2 said nothing. Then Helen McGuire stood up. Helen was 62 years old. She had been the office manager at Caldwell Properties for 18 years. She had worked for Donald Caldwell back when the company operated out of 2 rooms on 10th Avenue. She had been in the building longer than anyone except Mitchell Crane himself. She had never spoken at a board meeting in her life. She was carrying a banker's box. She set it on the table between the water glasses and the legal pads, and she opened the lid. Inside were original vendor contracts, payment authorizations, and invoice copies going back 3 years. Photocopies, organized by date, flagged with the same colored tabs Adam had used, yellow, red, blue, because Helen had taught Adam that system his first week on the job. "I noticed the discrepancies 2 years ago," Helen said. "When I processed a payment for Cascade Building Group that was double the bid amount for an identical project the year before. I started pulling original contracts from the archive and comparing them. I've been doing it for 14 months. She looked at Mitchell, then back at the board. "I didn't know who to bring it to," she said. "Mr. Crane approved all vendor payments. He signed the purchase orders. I wasn't certain Miss Caldwell had the board's support to act on it without being overruled." She straightened. "I'm certain now." The documents matched Adam's analysis line for line. Same vendors, same contracts, same markups. Mitchell Crane's signature on every authorization. 2 independent sources, 14 months apart, arriving at the same $4.7 million conclusion. The vote was 6-2. Mitchell Crane was suspended effective immediately, pending a full financial investigation. His access credentials were revoked before he reached the elevator. Security walked him to the lobby with his jacket over his arm and his car keys in his hand, and the glass doors of Caldwell Properties closed behind him at 11:47 in the morning. The weeks after the board meeting moved slowly. The company's legal counsel referred the financial records to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division in Portland. Mitchell retained a private attorney. His wife's name appeared in federal filing requests tied to the Washington State LLC. The 3 board members who had supported him through the vote resigned over the following 2 weeks, quietly and without public comment. Megan's position was reaffirmed by the remaining board in a unanimous vote. The performance review was withdrawn. The leadership transition memo was stricken from the record. For the first time in 2 years, no one in the building was questioning whether Megan Caldwell belonged in the chair her father had built. But something in Megan had gone quiet. Not broken, not fragile, just still. She had spent 25 months fighting for a company that someone had been hollowing out from the inside, defending her right to lead an organization that was being stolen from beneath her while she worked 18-hour days to keep it alive. Now the fight was over, and the energy that had held her upright had nothing left to push against. She came in earlier. She stayed later. She filled the space where the battle had been with more work, because work was the only shape she knew. Adam continued in his role. He did not request a title change. He did not submit his analysis to anyone outside the company. He did not mention the board meeting, the LLC, or the $4.7 million in any conversation with anyone. He came in at 7. He left at 3:15. The maintenance reports appeared on Megan's desk every afternoon at 4:50. The glass of water appeared every evening she stayed late. One afternoon in late November, Megan called him to her office. She closed the door. He sat in the same chair across from her desk, the same chair where she had learned his real name 8 weeks ago. "I want to offer you the VP of Operations position," she said. "The title is real. The salary matches market rate. You've more than earned it." Adam looked at her for a long moment. His hands rested on his knees the way they always did. I appreciate that, he said. I do. But the VP role is a 50-plus-hour commitment. Board meetings, vendor negotiations, overnight project reviews. I pick up my daughter at 3:15 every day. That is not flexible. Megan nodded. She understood the math. She also understood, sitting across from a man who had dismantled a $4.7 million fraud from a basement office with no window, that Adam Kessler was not turning down the title because he lacked ambition. He was turning it down because he had already decided what mattered most, and no corner office was going to rearrange that decision. Then stay where you are, she said. She paused. And keep leaving the water. Adam stopped at the door. He turned back. You know about that. I've known for a while. That evening, Megan stayed at her desk past 7. At 7:10, the door to her office opened. Adam walked in carrying a glass of water. He crossed the room, set it on the right side of her keyboard, same spot, same level, and looked at her. Megan looked back at him. She watched his hand release the glass. She watched him straighten and step back. The whole exchange took 4 seconds. He left without a word. She picked up the glass and drank. It was a Saturday in early December when Megan drove to Adam's apartment in the Hawthorne district. She carried a folder of signed board documents that needed his counter-signature for the ongoing investigation file. The documents could have waited until Monday. She had put on a coat and driven across the river anyway. Josie opened the door. 9 years old, straight hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, a paperback book tucked under one arm with a cracked spine that said she was about halfway through. She looked up at Megan with the particular calm of a child who is comfortable around adults and does not perform for them. Hi, Josie said. Dad's in the kitchen. Megan stepped inside. The apartment was small and clean in the way that only well-maintained spaces are, not decorated, just organized. A bookshelf ran the entire length of the living room wall, filled past capacity, paperbacks doubled up behind hardcovers. No television in the main room. A table by the window with 2 chairs, one standard and one slightly smaller with a cushion on the seat, so Josie could reach comfortably. The window looked out onto Hawthorne Boulevard, where Saturday foot traffic moved past the bakeries and bookstores and vintage shops that made the neighborhood feel like a small town dropped into the middle of a city. Josie led Megan through the living room without ceremony, pointed toward the kitchen doorway, and disappeared down the hall to her room with the book still under her arm. Adam was standing at the counter, putting away groceries. Brown paper bags from the farmer's market on the counter, produced lined up in neat rows. He looked up and saw Megan standing in his apartment and did not seem surprised. Board documents, Megan said. She held up the folder. Adam took it, set it on the counter beside a bag of apples and a loaf of bread wrapped in wax paper. Have you eaten? He asked. It was a simple question with a complicated answer. Megan had not eaten since a granola bar at 10 that morning. She had driven across the river with documents that did not need delivering to an apartment she had never been invited to. On a Saturday, she had no reason to be anywhere but her office. She knew the answer to his question, and she suspected he already knew it too. No, she said. Josie, Adam called down the hall. Set a 3rd plate, please. Josie's voice came back immediately, clear and unsurprised. Already did. Megan looked at Adam. He looked back at her and said nothing. She set her coat on the back of the chair with the cushion, then moved it to the other chair when she realized she had taken Josie's spot. She sat down at the table. Dinner was simple. Pasta with olive oil, garlic, and red pepper flakes. A salad Josie had assembled herself, with cherry tomatoes cut in uneven halves and too much dressing pooled on one side of the bowl. A loaf of sourdough from the bakery 2 blocks down that Adam sliced at the table with a bread knife that had seen years of use. Josie talked about a book she was reading. Something about a girl who lived in a lighthouse and a dog that could predict storms by the way it turned in circles before lying down. She described the plot in the wandering, recursive way children describe plots, jumping ahead, doubling back, adding details she had forgotten, and she talked without checking whether anyone was listening, because she already knew they were. Adam refilled Megan's water glass when it was half empty. He did it without pausing the conversation, without looking at her, the same way he had done it every evening in her office for 8 months. Megan watched his hand on the glass and said nothing. After dinner, Josie cleared her own plate, said goodnight to Megan with the same quiet composure she had opened the door with, and disappeared down the hall. A moment later, the sound of a reading lamp clicking on, and then silence. The apartment settled into the particular stillness of a small space at the end of a day, where the quiet feels less like absence and more like the room finally exhaling. Adam walked Megan to the door. She put on her coat. He handed her the folder she had brought, still unsigned. "Monday," he said. "I'll bring them in." Megan nodded. She was standing in the doorway with her coat buttoned and her keys in her left hand, and she did not leave. "I don't need you to carry me," she said. "I know," Adam said. "I don't need anyone to carry me. I know that too." She stood there. The hallway light was behind her. The apartment light was behind him. The doorway was the only space that belonged to both of them, and neither moved to close it. Megan reached out and took his hand. Not the way she had that night in the executive suite, unconscious and reaching through sleep for something she could not name. This time her eyes were open. Her fingers found his deliberately, threading between his knuckles the way you hold on to something you have decided not to let go of. She looked at him, and he looked at her, and neither of them said a word. Adam closed his hand around hers. He did not pull her closer. He did not step back. He stood in the doorway of his apartment with his daughter's reading lamp glowing down the hall, and outside the December rain was falling on Hawthorne Boulevard the way it always falls in Portland, steady and without apology, and the woman standing in front of him was holding his hand the way she had held it in her sleep, except this time she was awake, and this time she was choosing it. They stayed like that for a long time. Neither of them had been looking for this. That was the part that mattered. Not the title, not the company, not the $4.7 million, or the board vote, or the glass of water that appeared every night on the right side of her keyboard. What mattered was that two people who had organized their entire lives around not needing anyone had found each other anyway, not by looking, but by standing still long enough for the distance to close on its own. And sometimes the hand you reach for in the dark is the same hand that was already reaching back.